Okay, peoples, put my finger over the mic here. When I get this flowing, it seems to be all right, but I've had a hell of a lot of airlock problems with this. Once you clear the airlock problems and you keep it reasonably full, it'll be fine. When it gets down to the tap down there, it all turns to bullshit. And I'm giving you the simplified version here to avoid about friggin' half an hour worth of waffling. At first I thought the airlock problems were like, basically when you have a down and up and a back down again, there's the potential for an airlock. And you say, oh, it's just a little bit of air, it'll just blow out. No, it doesn't blow out. It starts bubbling and glugging and fucking around, and it's almost like when you try and get a container, say one of those 20-litre cube containers, something like that, and you try and empty it out. You know, you could theoretically say, well, what we should do is just go, the water roars, but it doesn't. You pour it like that, and then it starts with the bubbles sucking up through, go glug, 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 shakes like hell, and it's a lot slower than it otherwise could be. And long story short, it's sort of, if the line's small enough, it can actually, and the water pressure's low enough because you've only got bloody 9 inches fall, it can actually just clog the entire thing and stop it. And that's what it has been doing. I have some very strange shenanigans happening that may not make sense to people in the real world, but it's just part of plumbing. Because you got to realise, like, it comes from that tank and then it sort of drops down because the dogs are dug under the house, and then I've got to have it go over a stump so it's up again, and then, you know, it sort of drops down again, and then it drops right underground, and then it comes back up again. There's so many ups and downs, it's just bullshit. But my way of fixing it has been to disconnect this. And as I said, if the water's full in there, you know, and you get it going, and I disconnect this and blow through this line, I'll literally blow up through that line and then give it a few seconds and it starts to flow. And it seems to be fine. And you're thinking, well, this just goes pretty much straight down. What's the issue? And I thought, oh, it doesn't quite go straight down, so I pushed it off I had basically no slack, but I managed to push it off the concrete pad there. And then I thought, well, maybe this humps a bit, so I dug this out a little bit, and I shit you not, I had a strange shenanigan at about 12:30 last night. I took this connector off, I blew down that line to get that going, and then the water started blasting out of this, and I'm not joking, there was a reasonable amount of pressure of water coming up this line and blasting out. I couldn't fucking believe it. How's that even possible? It's on the fall. Well, I think it was basically the water between where it was sitting on top of the concrete pad last night and back to here. And that concrete pad was the highest point, and it was the weight of water from that concrete pad and the line back through to here. But I had this damn thing up here, and it's still squirting water out. You know, and you think, holy smoke. And, it was blasting out with a fair bit of pressure. I blew down that line, it was gurgling and farting around. It just seems I've got to disconnect this, waste a bit of water on the ground, blow and piss around. Now, there's a way that this can be done. Under a decent amount of pressure, you've got a thing, they're about that big. I mean, some of them are that big, but they're about that big, usually. You got a little barb on the back, and like a dome shape. It's almost like looking at the bottom of a flower. Your barb, your half-inch barb or whatever comes up, and then it sort of domes out, and you get all these slots, and then it comes to a second piece, which is like a screw-on plastic cap, like a screw-on lid at the top. You undo that, there's a little diaphragm inside it, which has a little thing like the end of my finger there, which sits inside your half-inch line on the bottom of this thing, on the stem, so to speak, of this thing, where the half-inch line comes in. That will sit back. It's got little slots in it. It can sort of, the air basically gets let through, and then once the water comes through, it goes bang, and it closes in on itself and blocks everything. up, and that's it. And it's basically designed to get air out of the lines, and long story short, when you have drip feeders in a vineyard, your first vine, let's say this is our, we have the line coming out of the ground, that's our first drip feeder, that'll start drip feeding. But when you got all this air in the line that goes up another 50 metres, this one would have been dripping for 15 minutes, and the air's still trying to seep out of all the other ones up the end, and you say, well, it's had 15 minutes water, I'll turn it off. Well, guess what? The water only got to those ones 50 metres away for friggin' 10 seconds, and then you've turned it off with 10 seconds of watering. So they put these things in to let the air out of the line, and they put them all basically at the end, and then it just hisses like hell, and then bang, slams shut. And you can stand behind it and beside it and hear it hissing like shit, and then all of a sudden, and it'll just sort of stop, and then bang, and all the water will start dripping out of the very last drip feeder and all that without a problem. Now, that sounds great. Trouble is they don't work under unless they're under pressure. And the fact of the matter is that I saw a situation where there was a blown connector and they couldn't build up enough pressure in the line, and then the whole bunch of these were leaking. And I mean, boss couldn't believe it, and he said, well, there must be at least 1 in 5 that isn't dirty, because they get bugs inside. Spiders crawl in there, earwigs crawl in there. We were pumping out a river, there's a little bit of mud that sort of ended up in the system that'll clog in there. And so you have to wash these diaphragms out. And he said, well, there's going to be at least 1 in 5 that are clean. How come all these are leaking? Turned out it was a blown connector. It was pissing water all over the driveway. But these need pressure to operate. I don't really have pressure. No, I don't have any pressure at all. But there's a way out of it. There's an old stunt they do with wood stoves. And those of you who own wood stoves will know about this, where you have connected to your hot water tank or something, I think it is, or off your outline from your hot water box inside your wood stove, somewhere there anyway, you have basically a T-piece that then goes to a big upright pipe, and this pipe will just like sit up right up above the height of your house, and that's designed for thermal expansion, not to affect the not to cause too much pressure in the little copper box that's in your wood stove. I could do the same thing and basically get a T-piece, and I might change around some of these connectors and whatever, and basically have a T-piece here that stands about 6 foot. All it's got to do is just be higher than both of these little tanks. And the highest one would be the 60-litre one around the corner that I was just showing. Realistically, I'll probably just go about 6 foot. I'll just mark it to the height of myself, and that should be about right. Might go 7 foot. And then, instead of having one of these things which are, I don't even know what they're called, with the diaphragms that needs pressure to shut off with the water to let the air out, we'll just have one of these things, probably mounted to something much like this, most likely this exact one. I might need to fix a bit, but anyway, that's the plan, and that should work just so long as the top of it is higher than the top of this, in order to let the air out of the lines and let things flow. And I think that's a real issue. And the way I'm seeing it at the moment, that black line is pretty much non-stop downhill, and it may have a little couple of humps before you get to the concrete pad, but after the concrete pad it's pretty much downhill. So there shouldn't be a problem, but there is, and that is the way I intend to fix it. It's almost like having a little tank or a bathtub, and you run water into the bathtub, and then you've got a connector at the other end of the bathtub that takes the water out, and it just releases any air out of the system. Well, you don't need that. All you really need is this T-piece and this line that sits up, and it'll release any air out of the system. And sure, it'll fill up with a little bit of water in the first foot or so, but that's why it's going to be 6 or 7 foot tall. Get the air out of the dam system, and it seems to be that this is probably the best spot because this seems to be where it all chokes up. If I disconnect this and give it a blow, you know, it'll flow without a problem, but then it's going to give us shit here. So there's just so much bloody line and air just getting in the way of everything. And surprisingly, from here back, it seems to not really have a problem with airlocks, regardless of all that shenanigans of all the ups and downs under the house, back out, back down, under the ground again and back up. Seems to all be pretty good there. But when it comes into here, this is where it gets a lot of bullshit and a lot of carry-on. So if I put it there, then we're right in the middle of the two, and right where the connectors all are anyway, and we should be alright. You ain't going to believe this, but I've got enough crap here to do it with a 1/2 inch line running through a tap. So if it all fucks up, I just turn the little tap off. I got this one from the brother-in-law. It's basically a threaded bit of very heavy polyethylene pipe, which means that I am going to simplify the hose connector shenanigan and give myself a couple of extra hose clamps, and I found I had another 1/2 inch hose clamp, and everything else was just threaded fittings from there, and a bit of tape, and I've got another full roll of that again. So yeah, so we're going to get it done today in a couple of hours. Actually, not even a couple of hours, probably another 20 minutes or something. And I'll get that stand over there and we'll whack it all in. It's not sort of a big issue at the moment. I've actually emptied out, not emptied the rainwater tank, but where I have the tap, the pipe goes down and then sort of comes back up and then goes down a little bit, just the way it's held by the wire. And yeah, I could have left it going and it would have been able to siphon through where it rose up and come back down, but it actually started to overflow a little bit. So I turned it off and then it lost its siphon, so it's still about, yeah, a little bit less than the 3rd full. And, you know, I was going to go down lower, but if you go down too low with all this blowing wind, I don't think that bloody tank is strapped down. We used to have it held with a big hunk of fencing wire going around, and the hunk of fencing wire's on it, tied off to nothing. So it's probably good to leave a third of the water in it to let it maintain its weight and stop it rocking in the wind, because obviously it's a bit higher up and it's got a bit more size to it. So yeah, if you emptied it right to the bottom, it might actually rock or something. It probably wouldn't, but anyway, it doesn't really matter, because that gives me 2/3 of a tank that can be filled before I turn the thing back on. I could lower that hose just by lengthening the bit of wire and empty more out, but it doesn't really matter anyway. Yeah, but anyway, I went down there, had a look at the IBC. Damn thing's about half full, one of them already. So the systems are running, but she'll be running a lot better once I have the ability to get rid of these frickin' airlocks that keep coming back every time the tank drains down to its tap. So yeah, I doubt I'm going to have much trouble with this one, just because of the shortness of the line and the lack of up and down-iness. It's funny how it sort of bubbles. It's almost acting already like a line, like an airlock release, but it's actually come right from around the other side, gone right out to the T-piece fitting, and then ran right back up through here and pushed the air into here. It's funny that it can actually push it that bloody far, because surprisingly tight enough to try and blow your breath through the line, but then again I've got the weight of the water in the line when I do that, so you know, that's probably got a lot to do with it. Surprising amount of restrictions for a 1/2 inch line, far more than I thought, and you had a 3/4 inch line, And it was a good idea, looking back, not to have a half-inch line going down there, because it would have moved nothing. It would have just been bullshit every inch of the frickin' way. And so I'm glad I got the 3/4 inch line, because there's that much restrictions in the half-inch line just going around here with a couple of ups and downs. Imagine running the half-inch line 1/8 of a mile, 200 metres. Fuck. I didn't think it was going to move with a half-inch line, judging by the way that the 80 metres of hose went out with the trees. I just thought half-inch, fuck, we'll be battling even get it dripping at the other end. And that's why I went with a 3/4 inch. I knew an inch would be fine, but too expensive. And half an inch wouldn't even work at all, so I settled for 3/4, and it's proved itself. And the only real issue is just these bloody airlocks, which we're about to fix. Well, there we go. That'll work quite well, actually. That looks a hell of a lot neater than it was. All these tangles of different fittings. Anyway, I've got to pack all this up. Yeah. With a bit of luck, this will all fire, but until it starts raining seriously, I won't actually know. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what we done.